Hi, my name is Dave Benson and welcome to Sign. Over the next 3 weeks I'm going to be joining your home group, I guess co-leading in a way with your group leader. I'll be running some of the teaching and they'll be running more of the discussion, facilitating that. Sign is about how to point people to Jesus. Do you know that when you became a disciple of Christ, you became a messenger? When Christ called you to come to Him, to recognize your brokenness and to receive His grace, He then sends you out into the whole world to make Him known, to make disciples. That when He called you out of darkness and brought you into the light, that Christ then tells you, go and share how awesome this has been, that we're to declare God's praises, and that we're to be the fragrance of Christ in this world so that people can, in a sense, even smell what it means to be connected to God, what the kingdom is like. So to be a disciple is to be a messenger. Now, when I speak of being a messenger, you probably know that what I'm talking about is evangelism. And maybe you're thinking, hey Dave, why use these coded words like sign and like pointing people to Jesus when you're really talking about evangelism 101, how to share the gospel? Well, there's a good reason for it. When I say the word evangelism or evangelist, what kind of images come to mind? What comes to mind for me is I see some angry guy standing on a soapbox in the middle of the city, maybe with a megaphone, handing out gammy tracts and telling people, like getting angry at them and saying, you need to turn or else. And often there's bait and switch strategies kind of thrown into that as well. Now, I'm not against street evangelism, I'm actually passionate for it. But my point is that these kind of images are really counterproductive for most Christians when it comes to sharing their faith. And they become a barrier to actually doing what Christ called us to do and being who He called us to be. Our culture is probably best understood by two phrases. One is we're post-Christian in attitude. Have you noticed that? When you share with some of your friends or try that, they often say things like, look, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, I'm really not interested. As though they know all about it. But then when you press further, what you find is the second thing, is they're pre-Christian in understanding. The common understanding is that Christianity is just about being a good person so you can get a ticket to go to heaven when you die. And in our kind of culture, what we really need is new words to tell the old story. We really need new images that excite our imagination. What we need are new signs. Now, a sign is like a wedding ring that you put on your fiancé's finger. It's like waving the Olympic torch or having your national flag showing. A sign is a physical symbol that points you to something deeper and something truer. And at the heart of our identity as Christians is to be a signpost pointing people to Jesus, to be a sign pointing to the kingdom. So we're going to explore this over the next 3 weeks, and this will become the frame through which we're going to understand our call to be messengers of Christ. So what is Sign? In essence, Sign is a 3-week course to gear you up to share the big story of Christianity and to intentionally point people to Jesus. The way it's going to work is that I'll be co-teaching in a sense with your group leader. I'll cover the teaching parts and they'll facilitate a number of activities. And each week what you're going to have is a number of concepts that we work through. We're going to look at being a signpost that points people to Jesus. How to get our sign language clear so that we can communicate a message that makes sense. And then we're going to look at how to be a sign writer to intentionally point people to Jesus. Now, these 3 studies in the group work alongside 4 messages that are going to be on the Sunday. And I'm not going to cover much on that, but there'll be some in your notes that bounce back off the themes that we're looking at there. But that's also going to give us 4 new images of what it means to be a messenger for Christ. Now, added to this, you're going to have 5 weekly devotions that go with each of these studies. And they'll have a few things to recap, to look back over what we covered in the sessions, and also some challenges. So make sure you stay on top of it, and if you miss a week, just have a look back what was covered the previous week so that you can get the most out of this course. So enough introductions. On to session number 1, being a signpost. What kind of sign am I? and where do I point? Did you know that a signpost can literally spell a difference between life and death? Perhaps you've heard the story of Christopher McCandless. It's told in the book and in the movie Into the Wild. Chris was a 22-year-old American who had pretty much everything that he wanted, except fulfillment. So he dumped his money, he left his middle to well-to-do family, he left them, and he headed off on the adventure of his life. Now, he renamed himself Alexander Supertramp, and he prided himself on being able to hitchhike anywhere and go anywhere he wanted to go, following his desires. Virtually no money, no possessions, but just a desire to travel and experience life. But his ultimate desire was to get to his utopia, freedom. And in his mind, freedom was found in Alaska. No one to tell you how to live, no structure, no rules, just you and the wild. So off he headed. And after a couple of years, Chris found himself at the frontier of Alaska, about to head into the wild. And he had virtually no gear with him, just a bit to trap animals and that kind of thing. And so he journeys out and explores the wilderness. And what happens is that he learns the skills to survive. He learns how to trap animals, how to feed himself out there, how to get by. He even finds a discarded bus and he uses that as a shelter. But over time, things go wrong. Chris is alone. But worse than that, he's lonely. His soul starts to die and he's missing companionship. And as it hits the heart of winter, he finds that there's very little food to survive. And he starts to get hungry. And he goes looking for a way to get back to civilization because he's lonely. But all he meets is rivers that are swollen and he's not able to find his way through. And on one fateful day, Chris finds this tree with a berry that looks familiar and he eats it, but it turns out that he mistook it for something else. And he starts to die. This thing is sapping all of his energy. And over the next 3 weeks, essentially he starves because he can't keep his food down. So Chris goes searching for a way to be able to make it back to civilization. Again, hits dead end after dead end, raging river, nowhere to go. And the last scene in Chris's life, if you can picture him there, he's inside this bus, just shivering, thin, and he inscribes on the wall, "Happiness only real when shared." If only. Salvation was at hand, if only for a sign. You see, that the saddest part of his story was that 2 kilometres away was a gauging station with a metal cable that ran across the river that he could have taken and it would have led him back to civilization and safety. If only for a signpost, something or someone to point him to life. Chris's story is really a modern parable. All around us are people who are following the way that seems right to them, but ultimately leads to death. And salvation is at hand, if only for a sign. And you know, Jesus, he holds himself up as the way that leads to life. He says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father but by me." And how can he claim this? Because he is God. And he really does have the truth that will set us free. And Jesus says that if he is lifted up, that he will draw all people to himself. So our role in this, our role is to be a signpost that points people to Jesus. That says, here's the lie of the land, here's the way that things are. Follow this path and it'll lead you to life. But notice what a signpost doesn't do. A signpost isn't coercive. It doesn't grab someone and say, you have to go this way. Instead, what it does is it tells a kind of a story. It tells a story of where you've been. It tells a story of where you are and of where you're going to. And a signpost clearly lays out the options and says, choose which way, but think it out. Work it out. And so our signpost, as we point people to Jesus, says, align yourself with a way that leads to life. Repent and follow Jesus. And that'll get you where you need to go. And that's what we're to be as a signpost. Your signpost can literally spell a difference for those you love between life and death. Your life gives people a chance to work out where they're at and where they want to go, and to offer them the way to life, which is through Jesus. What a privilege. What a privilege. And so in this session, the big win is that we're going to learn a clear way of being a signpost that points people to Jesus. A way of sharing the big story that leads them to life. So make sure as you move through the materials, you leave enough time at the end of your group, probably a good 20 minutes, to work through this approach to sharing the gospel. But first what I want you to do is to pause the video, and we're going to take some time to pray and commit this to God. Because guys, we can't be a signpost pointing people to Jesus unless the Father draws those that we love and unless He empowers us to be a witness that points people to Jesus. So take the time to do that now, and then I'll see you in a few minutes' time as we explore what the nature of the gospel actually is.